Hey, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to summer session one, as well as to PPA 660, Organization Theory and Behavior. We have about 12 or 13 folks registered for the course, so I'm assuming we'll have a few more people who will be joining us along the way, but it is 6 o'clock, and so I want to be respectful of your time and get started right on time. I try and start right at 6 o'clock for all of our sessions, just so can make sure we can get through all of our information and get out at a reasonable hour. But this is PPA 660, Organization Theory and Behavior. My name is Dr. Powell, and I am the instructor for this course. This is a summer course, and if you've had summer courses in the MPA program before, you know that these summer courses go by very, very quickly. They are 6-week courses. For our purposes in this course, since we meet on Wednesday evenings, Juneteenth actually falls on a Wednesday, and so therefore, instead of 6 Zoom sessions, we only have 5 Zoom sessions scheduled for this course. We have tonight, we have June 5th, June 12th, June 26th, and then July 3rd, and then we're all wrapped up and the course is over. So only 5 Zoom sessions for this course, just because of the way in which the schedule kind of fell for this first summer session. I have the course available on Canvas. Hopefully, you've all had a chance to go onto Canvas and take a look at the course and kind of familiarize yourself a little bit with the course and some of the requirements of the course and some of the things you're going to be doing. The syllabus is available on the Canvas site, so you've probably had a chance to take a look at it already. But I thought what we would do tonight in our first night together is spend the first part of the class going through the syllabus, talking about the course, talking about course requirements, making sure everyone's on the same page with what we're doing, when we're doing it, why we're doing it. And then since we only have 5 instead of 6 sessions, then in the second part of class tonight, to really get into some of our substantive information, talking about what the study of organization theory is, talk about some of the differences between studying public versus private sector organizations, and then kind of set the stage for how we are going to go about studying organization theory and essentially the evolution of public organization theory over the past 150 or so years. And so we'll do all that then in the second part of class tonight, so we can really hit the ground running and make sure we have ample time to cover all the information that we typically cover in this course. I'm sharing out the syllabus with you, so you should be able to see the syllabus up there on your screen. And you'll see on the syllabus, the beginning of the syllabus, I've got personal information up there, my name, my office number. Obviously, since we are doing this kind of in an online type of approach, so that we're not going to have on-campus class sessions, I will not be in my office very frequently during the summer session. So the best way to contact me will be via email. I always respond to email very quickly. You send me an email, you'll get a response certainly within probably about 10 or 12 hours, probably a lot sooner than that. Don't be alarmed if you get a response in 5 minutes. It just means that I was on my computer and on my email at that point in time. So if you need to contact me, if you have any questions, if you have any issues in terms of turning something in on time, send me an email and we can certainly discuss it. Office hours, I'm making them by appointment this summer. All you have to do is just send me an email and we can usually handle most things through email. If it's a more complicated issue and we need to schedule a separate Zoom session, we can always do that as well, but we'll do all that by appointment. As I said, we've got our 5 class meetings on there and the Zoom page on there as well. I mean, you're all here tonight, so you know how to access the course. And so the Zoom link is going to be the same for all of our Wednesday night sessions, so that will not change throughout the next 6 weeks. As I go through the syllabus here tonight, if you have any questions or need any clarifications, you can always feel free to flag me down and ask those. You can use your microphone, but if you would rather use text chat, I've got my text chat box open, and so I'll be monitoring text chat throughout our session tonight and all of our future sessions, so I can always answer questions that you post in text chat as well. So the course description, this is a core course in the MPA program. I took a look at the roster, and I know the vast majority of people in the course are in the MPA program. But I also realize that there are a few people who are not in the MPA program who are taking this course this summer. So as we go through the syllabus where necessary, I'll point out some of the things that if you're not in the MPA program, you won't have to worry about because we've got pre-instructional and post-instructional assignments that are really very much oriented around the MPA program and folks in the MPA program. But this is a core course in the MPA program. An organization theory and behavior course is certainly a staple of the vast majority of MPA programs across the country. You're really going to be hard pressed to find an MPA program that doesn't have some manifestation of an organization behavior type of course in that required core curriculum. And in these organization theory courses, what we'll do is we'll cover a variety of different topics, such as principles of organizations, which we'll talk about in the second half of class tonight, different schools of thought, such as classic organization theory, neoclassical organization theory, such as human relations theory, human resource management theory, motivational theory, leadership theory, systems theory, participative management theory, group theory in terms of leading organizations, organization culture. And so, what I like to do in this course is kind of take you through the evolution of the public organization theory literature, beginning with Max Weber, who, if you're in the MPA program and you had the 500 course, you talked about Max Weber. That's kind of where we start in the late 1800s, and then we'll track the evolution of the literature all the way up to the modern period of time. And the way in which we are going to do it is we're going to do it to kind of highlight some of the similarities and differences between different schools of thoughts and different theories that have emerged over the past 150 years. So the primary purpose of this course is not only to introduce you to the primary theories and schools of thought in organizational studies, but also to provide a basis for the application of theory to practice. If you had me for the 500 course, you know that I am very much all about this idea of an MPA program being both an academic as well as a professional program. As an academic program, we have certain scholarly expectations of you. This is a master's level program. So, in terms of your critical thinking, in terms of your writing, there are these scholarly expectations, but it also is a professional program. And as a professional program, our goal throughout the entire program, irrespective of which course you are taking, is to always find that nexus between theory and practice. So how can we take these theories and how can we place them into the practice of public administration to make our public organizations more effective and more efficient? I always tell all of the classes I teach that I have a favorite answer and I have a favorite question. My favorite answer is it depends. And it depends can be a frustrating answer, but I really do think that in public administration, so many things are contextual. So many things are based upon the situation in which we are leading and managing organizations that there is no one best approach. Rather than looking for the best approach in public administration, we are looking for the most appropriate approach to apply in that given situation based upon the contingencies that we are facing. So I always say it depends. It's kind of our most appropriate answer. And then my favorite question is, so what? So, especially in a class like this that is so theory based, we're learning about all these different theories of organizations. Well, so what? How does that then help us on a daily basis in the world of public administration? How can we take these theories and apply them to our modern day organizations to, again, make these organizations more efficient and more effective? Because when we're done, that's what we're trying to do in public administration. We are reforming the bureaucracy. We are reforming it to try and make it more effective, to make it more effective in terms of serving the wants, needs, and desires of citizens, making it more effective in terms of how we spend public money, making it more effective in terms of how we treat our employees and how we help our employees develop as human resources. And so there's no one way to do that. But if we can find the theories and the concepts and the principles that are appropriate to apply in certain situations, that is what will help us make our organizations much more effective. So we're always looking for that nexus between theory and practice. I've only listed 3 learning objectives for the course. I try and keep the learning objectives as concise as possible, to summarize and synthesize primary organizational theories, to accurately apply these theories to organizations, and then to prepare and present a coherent organizational analysis. That organizational analysis paper will serve as what we call our post-instructional assignment. For everyone who's in the MPA program, you're probably aware by now that all of our core courses, with the exception of PPA 500 and PPA 697, all the other core courses have a requirement for what we call pre-instructional and post-instructional assignments. Pre-instructional assignments that are usually completed early on in the course. Post-instructional assignments, kind of that walk-away assignment that you do at the end of the course that kind of pulls everything together and ties all the major concepts from the course together into one assignment. The organizational analysis that you will be doing will be your post-instructional assignment. In a couple minutes, I'll talk about for the pre-instructional assignment, we'll be using those weekly Canvas essays that you will be posting to discussion board in our Canvas site. But we'll get to that in just a second. But just to let you know, those are the post and the pre-instructional assignments for this course if you are in the MPA program. If you're not in the MPA program, you're still doing the assignments. It's just you don't have to worry about holding on to them and submitting them in a portfolio like your MPA colleagues will need to do once they get to the end of their MPA program. The textbooks for the course, the primary textbook is by Jonathan Tompkins, and that's Organization Theory and Public Management by Waveland Press. This textbook, in my opinion, is, in my practice, has been the best textbook, most appropriate textbook to use in an organization theory course. I've been teaching organization theory for a long time now. I've always liked using the Tompkins textbook for a variety of reasons that I'll talk about in a few minutes. The problem is that Jonathan Tompkins retired a couple of years ago, and so he's kind of living the life of a retired professor. And it became more and more difficult to get a hold of this book. And so what a co-author and I did is we got in touch with the publisher and got in touch with Jonathan Tompkins himself, finally convinced him with some help of his wife to go ahead and do another edition of this textbook, another reprint of this textbook that just came out last summer, in summer 2023. And so we're going to be able to use this textbook at least for a few more years. I think that's a great thing because, again, I love the way the organization of the textbook is. I also love the approach that he uses in terms of tying all these different theories and all these different schools of thought together. So that's going to be our primary textbook. Then you also have the Classics of Organization Theory, similar to Classics of Public Administration that you may have used in your PPA 500 course, but focuses squarely on organization theory articles. That's by Shafritz, as well as Ott and Jang, and there are a couple others who also contributed to it as well. But that's the Classics of Organization Theory. The reason why we assigned that is so that you have some firsthand exposure to some of these organization theories so that you can read these works yourself, form your own perspectives, form your own opinions about those articles, rather than just sitting back and listening to me tell you what I think about those articles and those authors. So those are the 2 textbooks. This course is enrolled in what's called the D1DA program, which is Day 1 Digital Access Program. If you haven't used Day 1 Digital Access before, I'll show you in a second. When we go into our Canvas site, as soon as you log into the Canvas site on the home page, there is a link there for D1DA, Day 1 Digital Access. And so the way in which the program works is that since this class is enrolled in it, you automatically from day 1, from actually yesterday, the beginning of the term, you have access to digital copies of both the Tompkins as well as the Shafritz textbooks. What the program does is that it then charges your account for the cost of those 2 textbooks in digital form. I believe one is $25 and the other one might be $40, something like that. I think it adds up to about $65 or something like that. And that gets charged directly to your student account, but it allows you to have digital access to the textbooks from day one. Now, if you choose not to participate in the day one digital access program, that's fine as well. When you click on it, you'll see there is an opt out button. You can always opt out of day one digital access by June 11th. So, June 11th is the last day to opt out of it. If you opt out on it, then you'll just be responsible for getting the books yourself, however you want to go about doing that. So, if you don't opt out, your account will be charged at 60 some dollars for the two textbooks. If you do opt out on it, then you will be going and getting the textbooks on your own. But again, I'll walk you through that and show you how that works in just 1 second. So those are the two textbooks that we are going to be using. Again, the Tompkins textbook is a very readable analysis of the major organization theories and schools of thought. Now, there are two reasons why I really like using the Tompkins textbook. The one reason is that the textbook will take us through the chronological development of public organization theory. A lot of these schools of thought and a lot of these theories developed as responses to some of the flaws and some of the criticisms of prior schools. And so the neoclassical schools like human relations and human resource management theory, those theories were developed as rejoinders or responses to classic organization theory. So by looking at the development and evolution of the literature in a chronological perspective, we can kind of see how the literature evolved as a critique of previous theories. And so it kind of gives you a really nice overview of the evolution and development of public organization theory. The other reason, and probably more important reason, why I like using the Tompkins textbook, and we'll talk about this in the second half of class tonight, is that he does a very nice job of kind of connecting the different schools of thought together. And he does that on the basis of three different comparisons. So every time we are done talking about a theory or a school of thought, we will then ask the question, what model of organizational effectiveness is represented by this school of thought? So how does this theory or this school represent or measure effectiveness of an organization? Then the second way in which he compares the theories together is by using what he calls the mechanisms for coordination control. So what do these theories say about the way in which we coordinate and control work within public organizations? And then the third approach he uses are motivational strategies. So what motivational strategies are emphasized by these theories, by these schools of thought? So I think by comparing the different schools of thought on those three bases, I think what that does is it kind of gives us more of a rhyme and reason for understanding the differences and similarities between all these different theories. I think all too often in a class like this, the class just inundates you with a bunch of different theories and a bunch of different schools of thought, but never really looks at the threads that connect all those theories and all those different schools together. I think Tompkins does a very nice job of doing that for us. And that's the primary reason that I like to use Tompkins in this course. So I'm a big fan of the Tompkins textbook. I hope you enjoy it. I think it does a very nice job of not just showing the themes between all the different schools and all the different theories, but also is a very readable. Yeah, it's a very digestible type of analysis of these different schools and these different theories. Again, as I said, the classics textbook provides you the opportunity to have firsthand exposure to some of these theories and read these theories and these works yourself, and then form your own opinions and your own perspectives. So those are our textbooks. And again, in a second, I'll show you how you can opt out of D1 DA if you'd like to. Evaluation criteria, what types of things will we be doing and how will these things be graded? Well, first you'll have your Canvas postings, your Canvas essays. So we're going to have weekly Canvas essays. There are 5 of those, and the first one is due no later than next Wednesday. Each one of these Canvas posts and responses to classmates, each weekly one will be due by the following class session. So you've got your first Canvas essay post, your first discussion board post that's due next Wednesday. And for that one, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be identifying for us the organization that you would like to use as the focus for your organizational analysis, and then giving us some details in terms of what's the primary purpose, what are the major functions of this organization. And that's going to then constitute that first discussion board post. And I tend to use the term Canvas essay, discussion board posts. I use those interchangeably. So in these Canvas posting, these discussion board posts, what I'm asking you to do is every week you'll be providing 3 posts in discussion board. The first post will be your initial post, which is a response to my prompt. And so again, for discussion board number 1, the prompt is identify your organization and provide the primary purpose and functions of that organization. So you'll be providing an initial response to that prompt. It can be parsimonious and concise. We are a public administration program after all, so we try and be as parsimonious. We try and say the most we can with the fewest words we can use. We tend to not be very verbose. We tend to not be very uh, opulent, if you will, in terms of the words that we use. We try and do things as quickly as we can because we have time pressures that we are facing in public organizations. So when I say a parsimonious response, I'm talking about, a couple of paragraphs certainly would be sufficient. I have 300 words on there. That's just the guideline. You can certainly go beyond that or be shorter than that. I'm not going to grade it based upon the number of words or the number of lines, but typically those initial responses are about 1 to 2 paragraphs in length. But please do make sure that you proofread your responses. I am going to be reading all the responses. I am going to expect that they are well written and that they look like it's something you've thought about, and it's not just some extemporaneous musings that you've posted in a discussion board. It's something you've really given a bit of thought to. Then in addition to that initial response to my prompt, then you'll also need to respond to 2 of your classmates each week. Those classmate response postings can certainly be much more brief. 1 paragraph is certainly going to be sufficient for each one of those responses to a classmate. So you'll have 1 initial response to my prompt and then a response to 2 of your classmates for a grand total of 3 posts that you'll be doing each week for our Canvas postings. There are 5 of these, each week's worth 20 points, 10 points for your initial response, and then 5 points for each of your responses to a classmate. Now, even though the due date is going to always be before our next class, so by the following Wednesday, I would ask that if you could give some consideration to posting your initial response earlier than that, because if everybody waits until the following Wednesday to post their initial response, then everyone's going to be scrambling to respond to 2 classmates, and it gets to be kind of messy at that point in time. So if you could post your initial response a little bit earlier in the week, just to give your colleagues a little bit of a chance to read your response and then be able to respond to it, rather than, again, scrambling on the Wednesday of class session. So those are our Canvas postings. Again, 5 of those at 20 points apiece. And when we go to the Canvas site in a couple of minutes, I'll show you what each weekly discussion prompt looks like, so you can kind of get an idea of the types of things that you'll be doing in those Canvas postings. Now, if you're in the MPA program, for the pre-instructional assignment for this class, we are going to consider that to be these Canvas posts. So it's important for you, if you're in the MPA program, to make sure that you keep a copy of these posts, because what will happen is once we finish this course, within about 2 to 3 weeks, you will then end up losing access to the course on Canvas. It will just disappear. And by the time you're at the end of the program and you're getting ready to put your student learning portfolio together, you're not going to have access to those posts on Canvas anymore. I'm probably not going to have access to them either. So it's important that you save those Canvas posts in electronic format, because you're going to have to include those in part 2 of your portfolio as the pre-instructional assignments from this 660 course. Now, if you're not in the MPA program, then you don't have to worry about saving them, because you don't have to worry about doing the student learning portfolio. But the Canvas posts will end up being our pre-instructional assignment for 660. Okay. Then the post-instructional assignment will be this organizational analysis paper. And in fact, let me just to give you some more details about it. Let me go ahead and move a couple things around just for my purposes here. My screen's getting a little crowded. And let me scoot down here to the end of the syllabus. And here at the end of the syllabus, I have details about this organizational analysis paper and all the required sections of this paper. Now, this organizational analysis paper is supposed to serve as a vehicle for you to take the theories and concepts that we talk about here in class and then apply them to a public or nonprofit organization. I know several of you are working currently in a public or nonprofit organization. Um, some of you may be working in a private sector organization. You can probably use that as well as the focus of your organizational analysis paper. Most people will use their own organization. However, you are not required to. I know that there could be some sensitivity in terms of talking about your organization and sharing, some practices of your organization more publicly with me, but also in our Canvas discussion board. So if you are not comfortable using your organization, you do not have to use your organization. You can use an organization that you are familiar with or an organization that you are interested in instead. So I'm not requiring that you use your organization. However, most people do because they know more about their organization that they're working in than any other organization out there. But I leave it completely up to you, the choice of your organization. But for the organization that you select, what you'll be doing in this organizational analysis paper is analyzing the organization according to the different theories that we discussed throughout this course. So the structure of the paper will look like the following. Obviously, you'll have a title page like you do for all the papers you submit in a graduate program. So a title page. Then after that title page, you'll then have an executive summary or abstract. In the business and public administration world, we usually refer to it as an executive summary. In the academic world, we refer to it as an abstract. But the executive summary of the abstract is basically a one-paragraph synopsis of what you are doing in your organizational analysis paper. So what are you studying and how are you doing it? Again, it should be on a separate page directly after the title page. It should be one paragraph, should be as clear and concise and parsimonious as possible. So you have an executive summary. Then you'll get into the paper itself, and the first real part of the paper is an introduction and background of the organization. This section of the paper is worth 10 points. It will provide the reader with a brief background information about the organization, things such as how large is the organization, what are the major functions of the organization, what does the hierarchy of the organization look like, what does this organizational structure look like. Again, if you're working in a large organization or you're looking at a large organization, it might behoove you to instead look at a unit or division or department within that larger organization. If you work in a large organization, you probably know that different departments within the organization oftentimes operate differently. They oftentimes will have their own unique organizational cultures, their own unique leadership styles. And so you may want to narrow it down to a division, unit, or department within that larger organization. The evaluation of the introduction and background section will be based upon accuracy and clarity of your description of the organization. Now, if you're working in the organization, you are the expert. You know more about the organization than I do. And so you can look at this section of the paper as this is your opportunity to teach me about the organization so that I can get up and running in terms of what the organization's all about, its primary functions, what its structure looks like. So look at this as kind of an opportunity to teach me about your organization. Oops, hold on a second. Okay, let me move us on down here. So the next part of the paper then we're calling the illustrative management practices of the organization. This section is also worth 10 points. In this section, you should identify which model of organizational effectiveness best reflects the approach of your organization. Now, in the second half of class, we will talk about the 4 different models of organizational effectiveness that Tompkins talks about, we will cover in this course. things such as the rational goal model, the open systems model, the human relations model, and the internal process model. So be telling me which of those models of organizational effectiveness are emphasized and used by your organization. Also, what mechanisms for coordination and control are being used by your organization as well, direct supervision or mutual adjustment or standardization. And we'll talk through all those in the second half of class tonight, as well as the motivational strategies that you typically see used within your organization. Things such as legal compliance, holding people accountable to rules, laws, policies, and procedures, or considerate leadership, paying attention to the wants, needs, and desires of employees as a motivational tool. Job identification, allowing people to help structure their jobs to help them develop as human resources, again, as a motivational tool. So again, in this section, you're going to be telling me the types of models of organizational effectiveness, mechanisms for coordination and control, and methods for motivating employees used by your organization or the organization that you are writing about. That section is also then, as I said, worth 10 points. Then classic organization theory section. In this section, you should discuss some of the ways in which classic organization theories, such as a Weberian bureaucratic structure, Taylor's scientific management, Fail, Mooney, and Gulick's principal schools, etc., some of these more classical approaches, how they manifest themselves within your organization. This section, you should provide examples to support your position. So if you're saying, this is scientific management in my organization, give me an example of why this is an example of scientific management. We have a position classification system. We do job analysis and job evaluation. Those are specific examples of scientific management as it's embodied within your organization. So it's always important to use those types of examples. So that's your classic organization theory section. Then, as you might guess, no surprise, another section will be the neoclassical organization theory section. This is also worth 20 points. In this section, you're going to focus on neoclassical theories such as human relations theory, human resource management theories, perhaps some of the motivational theories that we talk about, and provide some examples of how human relations, human resource management theories are illustrated within your organization. Then a section on systems theory, again, worth 20 points. In this section, you'll talk about the type of system that this organization operates within. Is this organization within an open system? Is it in a closed, more natural system? And again, provide examples to support what type of system the organization exists within. And then the final section of the paper is the impact of the organization on excellence section. This is worth 10 points. This section will discuss how the organization attempts to achieve excellence in its operations. What organizational characteristics contribute to excellence, which characteristics may inhibit excellence. More basically, how does the organization know if excellence has been achieved within the organization? So how does the organization achieve excellence? How does it measure excellence? What characteristics contribute to excellence? What characteristics can inhibit the achievement of organizational excellence? So those are the primary sections of the organizational analysis paper. As always, if you are using external sources, you should always have a reference page and attach a reference page. Your citation should be in APA 7th edition format. APA 7th, as you probably know by now, uses in-text citations, and so you'll have in-text citation where you'll use in parentheses the author's last name, comma, and the year of publication. Then in the reference page, you'll have the full citation in APA 7. If you're in the MPA program, hopefully you have been using APA 7 throughout your time in the program, because that is our style manual that we're supposed to be using in all of our courses. We adopted APA format years ago. I'd say probably close to 20 years ago now. We adopted APA. And so you should be very familiar with it. If you're coming from outside the MPA program and you haven't used APA yet, you may want to do a little refresher on APA 7th. If one really good online source, if you don't want to buy the publication manual for APA, is Purdue University. And if you just go into Google and you just put Purdue OWL, OLOWL, Purdue OWL, and just search that, you'll then get taken to the Purdue University site that lists really great examples of how you cite journal articles, how you cite books, how you cite government documents, and we'll have great specific examples on that website. Because APA 7th is a little bit wacky. It's kind of strange in that for article titles, you do not capitalize every word in an article title, which sounds kind of weird. And then journal titles are always in italics. And so you italicize the journal titles, but you don't italicize the article titles. But that's APA. Make sure all your citations are in APA format. One thing I will emphasize with this organizational analysis paper is that I don't consider it to be a research-oriented paper. I am more interested in your ability to identify the theories and the concepts from class in the organization you're writing about. So this is much more of an applied type of assignment, more critical thinking than it is research oriented. So I don't think you'll have a very extensive reference page because that won't necessarily be necessary. But if you are using external sources, you'll need to cite those. If you're using information from the class, information that I talk about or we talk about in our discussions, I don't require you to cite that. I know some instructors do. I don't. I mean, I just think that's kind of common knowledge. And it's common information that's available to everybody in the class. And so you don't have to cite me. You don't have to cite that type of information that we have in our discussions and our weekly lectures. It's just, if you're actually using truly outside external resources, those do need to be cited. And please do make sure to proofread the paper. Make sure it's well read. It's well proofread. I will not go through and line edit the entire paper. I used to do that when I was younger. I am old now, and I've learned better than to do that. But I will read every single word in the paper, and I will make some comments here and there, and I can't help myself. I will insert some edits here and there, but I will not line edit the entire paper, but please do make sure that it's well written. Please do make sure it looks like a final draft as opposed to a first draft. And that will then be our organizational analysis paper assignment. And that, for all you in the MPA program, that is what will then serve as your post-instructional assignment for your student learning portfolio. So the 5 Canvas essays are the pre-instructional, and then the post-instructional will be this organizational analysis paper. Now, everyone always asks about how long should this paper be, and that's a very valid question. I am more concerned about quality than quantity. And if you can be very concise and you can address all these parts of the paper and you can incorporate all the theories and concepts very well into your organizational analysis, that's great. And I commend you for that and I appreciate that. You don't have to write a dissertation. You don't even have to write a master's thesis. In the past, usually these organizational analysis papers are less than 15 pages. They're oftentimes in the range of maybe about 8 to 10 pages. But that's just a rule of thumb. If yours is longer than that, that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to stop reading at 15 pages. If it's shorter than that, but you've still covered all the required elements of the assignment, that's going to be absolutely fine as well, because I'm very interested in quality, not really interested in the quantity. Questions on the organizational analysis paper? Any questions at all on that? If any questions emerge, feel free to put them in text chat, and I'll be watching text chat as we go and happy to circle back and answer any of those questions you may have. So we've talked about the Canvas postings, we've talked about the organizational analysis paper. Then you also have this final assessment. Every now and then I slip up and call the final exam. It's really not an exam, it's a final assessment. The final assessment is already on our Canvas site, so you can start working on that anytime that you want over the next 6 weeks. The final assessment is essentially a mini organizational analysis of the one organization that we all share, which is Cal State Long Beach. So in that final assessment, what you'll be doing is you'll be talking about some of the classic organization theories that you see alive and well here at Cal State Long Beach. Then you'll talk about some of the neoclassical theories, such as human relations, human resource management that you see here at Cal State Long Beach. And then the third part of it, you'll talk about the system in which Cal State Long Beach operates. Are we within an open system with a lot of external influences? Is it within a more closed system? And those are the three elements that you'll be talking about in that final assessment. Now, for some of you work at the university, and so you've got some firsthand knowledge of the university and all those different aspects of the university's organization. For some of you who do not work at the university and you're just a student at the university, you may just have to reach back to some of your experiences in terms of working with different offices at the university. Use university websites. The web or university has a lot of great websites that talk about the organization structure of the university, that talk about what all the different elements of the university do, and you can glean information from those websites to help you answer those questions about classical theories, neoclassical theories, and then the system that the organization operates within. So that's what we're going to call our final assessment. But again, it's available for you. You can work on that as you wish throughout the next 6 weeks, as long as it's done and submitted by July 3rd. I should also mention that July 3rd is also the final due date for the organizational analysis paper as well. So those two assignments are both due July 3rd. You can certainly turn those in early. And if you get those papers done, the final assessment done early, you can always turn it in as soon as you get it done. I always grade assignments on a rolling basis. And so if you haven't had me in class before, don't be concerned if you turn in a paper and then within half an hour you get the paper back with comments and a grade. It just means that whenever papers come in, whenever I see that they in Canvas it tells me to do item and there's a paper that's been submitted, I kind of have to go and review it and evaluate it at that point in time. So you should get responses, you should get feedback very, very quickly on these assignments. Okay. And then the fourth major category of assignment is this PowerPoint presentation. I still call it PowerPoint. You can use any software program that you like, that you're comfortable with, but every member of the class will need to do a presentation of their organizational analysis paper during our final Zoom session on July 3rd. The presentations usually are pretty short. They're about 10 minutes or so. And you'll just take us in your presentation through the different parts of your organizational analysis paper for your organization. So very brief 10-minute presentation, very informal. Again, you can use PowerPoint, you can use Canva, you can use whatever you'd like to put your slides together. But I do like for you to have some type of slides that you can then share with the class so that we can kind of follow along with your presentation. What I will do on that July 3rd session is I will enable screen sharing, and then we'll just go through and everyone will get a chance to do their presentation. And when I enable screen sharing on that night, then you'll be able to go ahead and share your slides. You'll have control over the screen and you can just then do your 10-minute presentation. Now, I know it's kind of awkward having that class session on July 3rd with July 4th the next day. I know some people are traveling. I know that can get maybe a little tough. If for some reason you're on the road or there's some reason why you cannot attend on July 3rd, let me know. Send me an email and let me know that as far in advance as you can. And then we can always schedule you for the week before, and we can have your presentation done the preceding week. But again, the whole purpose of having these presentations is, and not to get too much into this, but we are a NASPA accredited program. And as a NASPA accredited program, we have 5 universal required competencies that we have to assure our accrediting body that our students will possess these competencies when they graduate from the program. One of those competencies is the ability to communicate productively and interact with a diverse workforce and citizenry in culturally responsive ways. One of the ways that we achieve that competency is through assignments such as these types of presentations. One thing that you'll notice when we get to the Canvas site, at the very bottom of the Canvas site, I have a link on there for engaging audiences. And it's just a link to a website. that gives you some tips and some tricks in terms of how to do presentations and how to best engage your audience within a presentation. And so I just provide that to you, just if you haven't done a lot of presentations in the past, just how you can get people engaged in your presentation, people actually following along and being interested in your presentation. So to recap, we have 5 Canvas postings, 20 points each for a total of 100 points there, a 100-point organizational analysis paper, 100-point presentation, and then a 100-point final assessment. In terms of the presentations, I'll be very honest with you. Typically, those tend to have some real great inflation to them. That's the effect of them, in that most people do very well on the presentations. And so they do tend to push the grades up a little bit, but that's not anything I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned if everyone gets an A in the class, that's fine with me. That doesn't affect me at all. I'm more concerned about what you take away from this class. And if the content from this class can help make you better leaders and managers in the public and nonprofit sectors. As you know, as students here at Cal State Long Beach, we do not have a plus or minus grading system. So it's just your A, B, C, D type of split. So it's a 90, 80, 70, 60 traditional type of grading scale. I do have a 1 percentage point flexibility rule. And so if you turn everything in on time and you participate in the class, if you come in at 89%, then I will give you the boost up to 90% and the A. But that's only if you do what I call give it the old graduate school try, that you're here, you attend our sessions, and you are turning everything in on time, then you'll get that 1 percentage point boost. I'll also make mention to the fact that, if there's a week that you cannot attend on a Wednesday, I know some of you work in cities and sometimes you have city council meetings that you have to support on Wednesday evenings. That's understandable. All these sessions will be recorded. I will have the recordings available on our Canvas site no later than the following Thursday morning, so the next morning. And then you can go and watch the recording if you missed the class session. And if you have any questions after watching the recording, you can always send me an email and I'm happy to clarify anything that needs to be clarified. But I do understand if you are not able to attend the session, you can always watch the recording. So far, so good. Everybody's very quiet tonight. I know it's the beginning of summer session and we're all kind of shocked that we're already in summer. Okay. All right. The outline of the course. What are we covering and when are we covering it? Obviously, here in our session tonight, we're doing just what we're doing right now, reviewing the syllabus and talking about course requirements. And then the second half of class, we'll start our substantive information looking at public organization theory. We'll do introduction to organization theory, the different ways in which we study organizations at the macro, the micro, and the management level. We'll talk about briefly some of the different schools of thought that we'll be covering throughout the next 6 weeks together. And then we'll also talk about those models of organizational effectiveness, those mechanisms for coordination and control, and those methods for motivating employees that we're going to use to compare our different theories and schools of thought together. The chapters in the Tompkins textbook for tonight are chapters 1 through 3. Obviously, you may not have had a chance to read those chapters yet because this is the first night of class. That's fine. You can always catch up on that before next week. But just very kind of introductory type of information. So if you haven't read those chapters yet, no worries. You can always do that before next week's class. The next week on June the 5th, we will get into classic organization theory. We'll deal with Weber, we'll deal with Taylor, we'll deal with the principal school. And you've got chapters 4 through 6, and then the Weber, Taylor, and Gulick articles from the classics text. T obviously represents the Tompkins readings. C represents the classic readings, and so that's how you can distinguish between them. The way in which I like to do our sessions, we're not going to do it this way tonight because it's our first night, but the way in which I'll do our subsequent sessions is I'm a big fan of kind of the lecture lab type of an approach, where in the first half of our evening sessions, we will discuss the information, go over the information for that week, and then we'll take a break. And then after our break, I usually will have some breakout room assignments, and we'll break out into rooms. We're a very small class, so we'll probably only break out into 3 different rooms. But then you'll have an opportunity to work with your colleagues on a prompt that I provide for you. We usually work on that for about half an hour. Then we reconvene as a class. We share what the groups came up with. So it's a little bit more interactive than certainly you just having to sit here and listen to me for 2.5 hours, which would be certainly a tragedy for everyone involved. So the second half will be much more interactive where you're working in those groups, actually taking this information and applying it to your organizations. And that's typically the way in which I like to handle most of our Zoom sessions. So we'll start doing that next week. First half of the class, classic organization theory. Second half of the class, breakout groups. Then on June 12th, we'll get into neoclassical organizational theory. We'll talk about human relations theory, human resource management theory. If time permits, we might get into some motivational theories. And then the second half of class to our breakout groups. June 19th, we do not have class due to the Juneteenth holiday. Then on the 26th, we are back at it with systems theory. We'll talk about natural versus open systems. We'll talk about group dynamics, the importance of managing and leading groups in public organizations. We'll talk about leadership. We'll talk about quality management. And we'll talk about one of my favorite schools of thought, which is organization culture. We'll talk about the importance of every organization having its own culture. We'll talk about the meaning of culture and why it's important to understand the unique culture in each one of our organizations. You can see your readings assigned for that week there as well. And then July 3rd, we'll reserve pretty much that entire session then for our organizational analysis paper presentations. And given the number of people we have in class, if we are able to do 10-minute presentations, that should take us just a little bit over 2 hours, and we should have plenty of time to get that taken care of on July 3rd. So in terms of our late papers, I usually don't like to accept late assignments. If for some reason life intervenes and you're not able to get an assignment turned in on time, please send me an email in advance. Give me a heads up, let me know what's going on, and we can usually try and avoid that late penalty. But the standard late penalty is a 10% penalty per day that assignments are late. Just kind of for your one stop shopping, I've provided for you the due dates for the different assignments. And so you'll need to post your Canvas assignments and your responses no later than the following Wednesday. So your first Canvas essay and responses must be posted by June 5th, next Wednesday. So discussion number 1, June 5th, discussion number 2, June 12th, discussion number 3, June 20th, because again, the Juneteenth holiday, I don't want to have anything due on the holiday. So it'll be due the following day, Thursday, June 20th. Then the fourth one due on the 26th, and the fifth one due then on July 3rd. As we said, presentations will occur on July 3rd, organizational analysis paper due by July 3rd, and final assessment, there it is, final assessment due on July 3rd as well. Again, we're saying due by. So if you can turn it in early, that's always very much appreciated. I didn't talk about reasonable accommodations, but if you do have some registration with the BMAC, the Bob Murphy Accessibility Center, as it's now called these days, they'll reach out to me and let me know, and we can always make reasonable accommodations. There's never been an instance where I've ever turned down a reasonable accommodation. Academic dishonesty and cheating, you know what the student handbook says about that, so we're not really going to get into that very much. But one thing that I do want to point out to you when it comes to that unfortunate topic is at the very bottom of all of our boilerplate language here in the syllabus, I have also added a little blurb about the use of artificial intelligence. And I'm adding this to all of my course syllabi, and I just want to kind of make you aware of the approach being taken by our department with the use of AI. Essentially, what the university has done is it's kind of left it up to departments and individual instructors to determine what they consider to be acceptable use of artificial intelligence. I will let you know that some of the instructors in our program take a zero tolerance approach to artificial intelligence. They believe that any use of artificial intelligence is equivalent to plagiarism and academic dishonesty and will be pursued as such. I take a little bit more permissive of a view of artificial intelligence because I really do believe that this is part of the future of public administration. I think it's going to be interwoven and integrated into our decision making in the public sector. It's already becoming integrated. It's going to be very integrated in within the next decade or so. So I think it's important for us to learn how to use it responsibly, and how to use it appropriately. So in my courses, the use of artificial intelligence is allowed for the purposes of brainstorming and idea generation. AI can be very, very good at getting us thinking about different ideas and brainstorming ideas. It can be a very, very useful tool. Obviously, it may not be used for writing papers or discussion board posts. That will be considered to be academic dishonesty. And if you use any generative AI so far, and I'm sure you all have, you'll probably know that it's not terribly accurate, at least not yet. I'll give you one example. I was going to put together an AI assignment for my PPA 500 course. And so I decided, I'm going to ask AI to provide me with a 10 reference list, 10 list of 10 references, peer-reviewed scholarly articles on a given topic. And so I asked it to generate those 10 references, and it generated 10 references, and those references looked great. They were articles that I had never seen before, and I was excited. I said, how did I miss these? I haven't seen them. And so I went and looked for them, and it turns out that 8 of the 10 references that AI gave me did not exist. That AI just basically made up the references, and there are no articles like that. What they did is it took some words from published article titles, combined that with journal titles, combined that then with issue numbers from other articles, and kind of squished it all together into what looked like a great reference, but the reference actually didn't exist. So we do still have to be very careful with the use of AI, but if you want to use it for brainstorming, idea generation, I think that is certainly acceptable. Just obviously you can't use it to write the assignments for the course, but that's kind of commonsensical and may go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. So that is our course syllabus. Those are the course requirements and expectations. Any questions at this point in time about the syllabus or the course itself? We all good? Okay. Let me then stop the share of our syllabus, and let me go in and share with you, if it will let me, our Canvas site, which has now disappeared from here. So I'll just have to share out my screen, and then we'll go and find it together. Let me. I'm going to have to log in again. It just logged me out. So bear with me a second when I log into Canvas. Oh, and do my multi-factor authentication, which is always a pain, but I guess necessary. Okay, that was quicker than I thought. All right, let me go into our course and kind of take you around the course a little bit and show you what it looks like. Let me go into student view. So it'll look just like the way in which it looks for you, hopefully. Okay, this is our Canvas site. And again, you've probably, if you've been on here, you've taken a look at it, so you kind of know what's on there. But announcements, I have an announcement welcoming you to this summer. Syllabus is provided for you right there at that link. What you're going to be using all the time will obviously be the modules. So here is the D1 digital access that I talked about, day one digital access here. And so to access your digital course materials, all you need to do is just click on this link. It will then load it in a new window. And here are the 2 books that we are using in digital form. To read them, just click on Read Now. It'll open up for you in VitalSource, and you have digital access to both of those resources as of yesterday. However, if you want to get your own books and you don't want to use day one digital access, you can opt out by June 11th. All you have to do is click the want to opt out button, fill out that form and submit it, and it'll then opt you out, and it'll then remove that 60-some dollar charge from your account. And so you can always opt out, but you have to do it no later than June 11th. Okay. And you can always, it's also possible if you opt out and then want to opt back in before June 11th, you can do that as well. You just have to make sure your final decision is made no later than June 11th. So that is how we are handling the digital textbooks for the course. And you can see there's still more information there. If you want to get even more information, you can always go to the website, csuob.edu/D1DA. So this is tonight's session. Here's your syllabus again, and then the slides that we're going to be using in the second half of class tonight to get us started talking about public organization theory. Paula, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Hey, yeah, a quick question about the day one digital access. Do you know, I've had some situations where those textbooks turn out to be like they're rentals. So you lose access after a certain period of time. Do you know if that's the case with these?
I believe it is. Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good point. I do believe that you have access throughout the course. Then maybe I think it's a certain number of weeks after the course ends. But yeah, I do believe that you then lose access to them.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then for next week, then we've got module number 1, classic organization theory, the slides there for you. And then to complete your Canvas essay, just click right there. There's Canvas essay number 1. And I know if you're in the MPA program, you used our site, Canvas sites before, you know how all this works. But to respond to Canvas essay number 1, you just hit reply, type your response directly in there and submit. And then you'll be responding to 2 of your classmates as well. Again, for Canvas essay number 1, you're identifying the organization you're using for your organizational analysis paper, and then providing an indication of the primary purpose and the major functions of that organization. Module number 2, we'll be doing neoclassical theories such as human relations, human resource management. I know in the classics text, the Follett article, I think, has been removed from the classics text. So I've included for you a couple of files on here that will basically explain Follett's writings and Follett's idea of democratic governance. So if it's not in the classics text, the information is there for you. Also, Chester Barnard, who I don't know if his writings are in the classics text, the newest version, I think that it's gone from there. I've provided a file on there for you as well, so you can learn more about Chester Barnard. And then Canvas essay number 2 is available for you. Canvas essay number 2, you will be looking at differences between public or nonprofit and public and private organizations. Identify 2 similarities, identify 2 differences between these types of organizations. And the primary purpose of that is the differences and similarities and the impact that those similarities and differences have on how we may study those organizations. And we'll talk about some of that information in the second half of class tonight. So going back to our modules, then you've got module number 3. Now, again, that's Juneteenth, so we don't have class that week, but the Canvas essay for that week, number 3, is 2 elements of Weber and 2 elements of Taylor as you see them within the organization that you are using for your organizational analysis paper. So it's our classical type of an approach. Then module 4, you've got your discussion of systems theory, motivational theories, and then Canvas essay number 4. And Canvas essay number 4, we're going to be looking at those neoclassical theories, identify and discuss Follett's theories are embodied in your organization. If you do not see any of Follett's theories in your organization, identify and discuss 2 ways that Follett's theories may be helpful for your organization. And then secondly, identify and discuss which of McGregor's theory X and theory Y you see utilized in your organization. In your discussion, please provide some specific examples. We will talk about all this information in class, and so you have all the information you need in order to answer Canvas essay number 4. And then finally, Module 5, July 3rd. This is when we'll be doing our presentations. I do have modern theories here. We're probably going to end up moving that up, though. So after class, I'll move that one up there to Module 4 to June 26th, because I think most of our time on July 3rd will be spent doing presentations. But then your final Canvas essay is using the organization you've chosen for your organizational analysis paper, discuss what type of system your organization represents and why. So how open, how closed is the system that your organization operates within. So those are your 5 Canvas essay prompts. As you scroll down, you'll see for your presentation, you can submit your PowerPoint slides or whatever types of slides you're using directly at that link. This is the link you'll submit your organizational analysis paper to, and this is a link that you'll submit your final assessment to. Then finally, at the bottom here, I have the link to the website talking about how you engage an audience in your presentation, just as some background information to help you as you think about putting your 10-minute presentation together. And that, in a nutshell, is our Canvas site. So you can see everything is pretty laid out, straightforward for you, pretty objective. Everything is there that you need in order to be successful in the course. Any questions about Canvas, our Canvas site, or anything available on our Canvas site? And let's stop that share. Any overall questions about the course at all? Because that's pretty much my my spiel on the course and what it is and the types of things we're going to be doing and why we're going to be doing them. Everyone good? Okay. As you review the syllabus, as you start getting into the course material, if you have any questions at all, you can always send me an email and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the course. It's always good to ask questions as early as possible rather than waiting to the end of the course when sometimes it could possibly be too late. So always ask, feel free to ask as early as possible. I'm here to help, and so don't be afraid to ask me questions. I'm always here to help you with those answers. Okay. In the time that we have left tonight, I think I'll probably be able to get you out of here early tonight as well. But in the time we have left tonight, let's get into some of our substantive information and kind of provide an introduction to organization theory, what we do when we study organizations, what organization theory is all about, and then talk about some of these differences between public and private sector organizations and differences in how we study organizations in those different sectors. So organization theory, you can take an organization theory class here in an MPA program. You can take an organization theory class in the College of Business. You can take organization theory in psychology. You can take it in rec and leisure studies. You can take organization theory classes all across the campus. The importance, though, here is that we are talking about public organization theory. So we are looking at some of the unique aspects and elements of public organizations. But in general, when we study organizations, we are studying organizational structures. We study the organization chart. We look at how hierarchical that organizational structure is. We look at the reporting mechanisms between different levels of the organization and different positions within the organization. We also study the behavior of organizations, not just to study how organizations behave, but to try and answer the question, why do organizations behave in the way in which they behave in certain types of situations? Organizations will behave differently depending upon the context of the situation in which they find themselves. Organization theory is also the study of external pressures, external environments, and how those external environments, how those external pressures affect the organization and how organizations then respond to those external pressures. And then organization theory also looks at the relationship between organizations and their membership. How do organizations interact with their employees? How do employees interact with their organizations? And when you look at those different areas of focus, they kind of run very much similar to if you did any work in political science at the undergraduate level, kind of the development of political science literature as well. In the world of political science, the traditionalist approach to studying political science was an institutional approach. We studied political institutions. So we studied the Congress, we studied the Office of the Presidency, we studied the Supreme Court, but we studied the institutions themselves, the structures of those institutions. As political science started to develop throughout the 1950s and the 1960s, we sort of changed the focus from a structural institutional focus to more of a behavioral focus. And this was called the behavioral era of political science. We started looking at the people within the organization and studying, instead of Congress, we studied members of Congress. And this is where we got things like John Kingdon's model of congressional decision making. We started to ask the question, why do members of Congress behave the way in which they behave and make the decisions that they make? We asked the question about presidents, and we look at incumbent presidents as opposed to looking at the office of the presidency. We study Supreme Court justices rather than the institution of the Supreme Court. So that's much more of a behavioralist approach. We're looking at the behaviors of individuals. But then in political science, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we move more into what's called a post-behavioralist approach. In that post-behavioralist approach, we start to look at the interaction between members of institutions and the institutions themselves. So how do members of Congress interact with the institution? How does the institution interact with members of Congress? That's kind of similar to this approach of organization theory, where you can look at structures, you can look at behaviors, or you can look at relationships between the institutions, the organizations themselves, and their incumbent members. And so I think organization theory, as it has developed over the years, has kind of tracked that same type of traditional behavioralist, post-behavioralist approach that we typically see in the political science literature. So as we view organizations, we can view organizations through a very macro level type of lens. If we're looking at the macro level approach, obviously we're going to be looking at the organization itself. We're going to be looking at how the organization is organized. We're going to be asking what the organization means for the outputs and the outcomes that are being created by that organization. As we go through this course, we will talk about differences between outputs and outcomes. We'll identify outputs as the products, the goods, the services that are being created on a daily basis by that organization. We'll identify outcomes as the consequences of those outputs. And so, what are some of the consequences that these outputs, that these goods and services have on the consumers, on the beneficiaries of those outputs? So, we'll kind of make that difference between an output versus an outcome. But the macro level approach, we're looking at what the organization itself means for the outputs and the outcomes of that organization. This is oftentimes much more aligned with the classical school of organization theory. Another way we look at organizations is the micro level approach. And this is where we're looking at those individuals within the organization. We look at individual employees in the organization. We look at units and divisions in the organization. We look at formal groups within the organization. We look at informal groups that emerge within the organization. We're kind of looking at individual components and parts within the organization rather than looking at the macro level organization as a whole. Another way in which we can view organization theory is through the management lens, where we focus on the processes and the practices that are being used within the organization on a daily basis. As we go through our discussion of the organization theory literature, we will highlight all three of these different ways of viewing organizations: the macro, the micro, and the management level type of an approach. So some of the schools of thought that we are going to talk about as we go through our discussion of the evolution of organization theory: classic bureaucratic theory from people like Max Weber, scientific management from people like Frederick Taylor, which then morphed into principal school with people like Luther Gulick, administrative management school with people like Henri Fayol and James Mooney. We'll talk about human relations and human resource management theories with people like Mary Parker Follett and Douglas McGregor and Abraham Maslow and Chris Argyris and Frederick Herzberg and others. We'll talk about the system school. We'll talk about people like Chester Barnard and Katz-Kahn, closed versus open systems theory. We'll talk about structural functional theory from people like Robert Merton and Philip Selznick. In structural functional theory, we start asking the question about the so what question. Well, so what? So this organization is doing this on a daily basis. They're creating these types of goods and services. Well, so what? What does that mean in the daily lives of people who are consuming those goods and services? We'll look at a school of thought such as quality management with people like Deming. And we'll talk about some of the applicability and some of the difficulty in applying quality management to public organizations. We'll look at organization culture from people like Sheen. We'll look at leadership theories from people like Wuchi and people like B. Guy Peters. And so we will look at a lot of these different schools of thought, a lot of these different theories, with an eye on trying to find the threads that tie all these different theories together. And that's really going to be my emphasis as we go through 150 years of organization theory literature. What really does tie these different theories together? And what are some of the differences that then gave rise to new schools of thought and new theories that rose up as challenges to existing schools of thought? So we're going to do that kind of in this chronological type of perspective, going from the late 1800s to the modern period of time. But we also have to realize when we're talking about public organization theory that, as we said, organization theory exists not only in public administration, it exists in business administration. It exists in a lot of other disciplines as well. But we have a good rationale for why we study organization theory here in a public administration program differently than in the School of Business. If there were no differences in organization theory between public and private sectors, we wouldn't have to have this class. We could just send you over to the College of Business. You can take their organization behavior class, and we could call it a day. But there are substantial enough differences that warrant offering a unique course in public organization theory. And some of those differences we know very well as students of public administration. Things such as the differences in power and authority structures. We know that our public organizations oftentimes come out of enabling legislation that's passed by Congress, by state legislatures. And so we kind of have this legal basis to our organization as compared to the private sector. In the private sector, an entrepreneur can decide that they want to start a business. They start a business, they start a private organization. You don't have that same enabling legislation. You don't have that same legal authority basis that you have with a public organization. In a public organization, we are charged with implementing public programs and public policies. These public programs, these public policies also carry with them this kind of legal basis, this authority type of structure that you don't have in the private sector. Also, whenever you have these programs and these policies that are being passed out of a legislative body and then handed to a public organization to implement, it means the public organization oftentimes does not have complete control over the establishment of the goals of those policies and those programs. The goals of those policies and programs may be articulated within that enabling legislation and then handed to the public organization. So sometimes we don't have the same control over the establishment of our goals and our objectives. So there's a difference in power and authority structure. If you think about a government, and you go back to, intro to political science, and you say, let's define what a government is. When you define a government, you usually define a government based upon two criteria. One criteria is control over a jurisdiction. That is power and authority. They have power and authority over a jurisdiction. The second element of a government is the ability to coerce residents. That's power and authority over residents. So you can coerce your citizens to do things such as pay taxes. You can coerce them to do things such as serve on a jury. These are things that for a rational, self-interested actor are kind of antithetical to their rational self-interest because they cost them time, it costs them resources, and they may not see the benefit directly that they're getting from engaging in those activities. So governments have that coercive ability, and that coercive ability then gets passed along to these public organizations, certainly far more so than what you might see with a private organization. The environment in which public organizations operate will be much different than the environment for private sector organizations. The environment for a public organization will be much more varied. It'll be much more challenging. You'll have a lot of different stakeholders that have a lot of different vested interests. It's a much more political type of environment in the public sector than what you have over in the private sector. When your stakeholders are citizens, and you are then providing and producing goods and services using the resources you get directly from citizens, directly from taxpayers, that is different than producing widgets or producing some type of private good based upon the profit that you are generating as a private organization. So certainly we have a much more political type of environment that we are working in, and we have to take that into account. Systems theory looks directly at this political environment and how organizations interact with this very political, very challenging environment. Environments also have an impact upon organizations in terms of their capacity to support those organizations. Some environments are capable of supporting organizations. They have a very well-trained, very professional labor pool that organizations can pull from to hire people to work into organizations. They have resources in terms of monetary resources through appropriations, through the availability of grant money that organizations can leverage to also help those organizations do their jobs. Um, Political support, that's another aspect of the ability and the willingness of the environment to support the organization. So we're oftentimes more concerned about all those different aspects of how the environment can support a public organization. In the private sector, oftentimes the environmental support comes primarily from consumers purchasing our goods. And if consumers are willing to purchase our goods at the price point that we have established, then the environment is capable of supporting that private sector organization. As we all know, as students of public administration in the public sector, we have much softer goals and objectives. Our goals and objectives tend to be a little bit more qualitative than the quantitative goals that are established in the private sector. It's not just profit, certainly, for public organizations. In public organizations, we have a myriad of values that we are trying to adhere to. Not just effectiveness, not just efficiency, but also things like social equity and social justice, political responsiveness, representative bureaucracy, protection of individual rights. We have a myriad of different values that we are trying to achieve in the public sector, far more so than just focusing on profit and sales as you might focus on with the private corporation. We also know as public organizations, even though we have this power and authority basis, we also have more constraints and more limitations on what we can do as public organizations. We have legal constraints that come from the enabling legislation for our organization, as well as our policies and our programs. We have procedural limitations that we have to follow to protect individual rights and create representative bureaucracy. You think just simply about the hiring process in a public organization compared to a private organization. In a public organization, the hiring process is going to be much more protracted, much more extended. It may take you 6, 7, 8, 9 months to get a job in a public organization, whereas you can be hired practically immediately in a private sector organization. As soon as they get you on payroll, they can hire you, perhaps the same day. So we have a lot more of those procedural requirements. We have procedural requirements in terms of how we manage employees. We have civil service requirements for how we manage our civil service employees. We also have collective bargaining agreement provisions that we have to abide by as well in the public sector to much more of an extent than you have to in the private sector. In the public sector, public employees tend to be unionized at a much higher rate than their private sector counterparts. In the public sector, you're looking at unionization rates at the federal level in the range of about 35% of employees are unionized. In the private sector, you're talking about around 10 or 11%. So a lot more of these procedural requirements because of collective bargaining and unionization. And as we mentioned, politics. Politics is the big difference between how we study public organizations and how we study private organizations. You know that as students of public administration from Woodrow Wilson and the whole idea of the politics administration dichotomy, and how within about 40 years of the politics administration dichotomy, we came to realize that it's difficult, if not impossible, to separate the world of politics and administration. Administrators have to play within the political pool in public organizations. So this means it's going to be difficult for us to take these business models and these business theories and apply them to our public organizations. There really is a need for us to either develop new novel theories for public organizations or to substantially modify these business private sector theories to make them apply to our public organizations. As we mentioned before, we have different goals and objectives. We have different values in the public as compared to the private sector. So just taking a private sector approach and applying it to a public organization probably is not going to work. In the public sector, we deal a lot more with this thing known as the principal-agent relationship. And I don't know if you've been exposed to the principal-agent relationship before in the program, but in the principal-agent relationship, you have a principal and you have an agent. The principal is that actor or that entity that oversees the actions of the agent. So the principal at the federal level would be Congress. The agent at the federal level would be a federal agency. And it's a similar type of corollary at the state level as well. In the principal-agent relationship, one would normally assume that the principal has most of the information because they are responsible for overseeing the actions of the agent. In reality, in the principal-agent relationship, it's really the agent that has the information. Who knows best what's going on a daily basis in an organization than the organization itself? Congress is not going to know what an organization is doing on a daily basis. So when the agent has more information than the principal, oversight becomes very, very difficult. When the agent has more information than the principal, it introduces this moral dilemma known as a moral hazard. The moral hazard is the agent, as a rational, self-interested actor, probably has an incentive not to provide that information to the principal. Because the more information the agent gives to the principal, the more information the principal will then have to hold the agent accountable for their actions. So that's the moral dilemma, the moral hazard for members of agencies and leaders of agencies. So with this principal-agent relationship, we have to realize that if we are trying to reform our agencies, we have to get the information first from the agency about how it's operating before we're going to be able to oversee its actions and then be able to reform those organizations. So the locus of information tends to reside at the agency level. In the private sector, it's a different type of situation. You don't really have the same principal agent type of relationship that you contend with in the public sector. As we said before, we have very soft goals and objectives, and it's much more difficult for us to empirically quantify our outputs and outcomes in the public sector as compared to over in the private sector. When you cannot quantify your outputs and your outcomes, it also then becomes more difficult for you to measure and reward performance in the public sector as compared to the private sector. If you look at a lot of private organization theories, many of those theories are predicated upon things such as pay for performance, being able to measure an individual's performance and then award them compensation based upon their performance. Obviously, in the public sector, when it's more difficult to measure performance, it's more difficult for us to use pay for performance. And so if you take a theory that's predicated upon pay for performance, like a pure scientific management or Frederick Taylor, and just apply it directly to a public organization where that's not possible, that business organization model, that private organization theory is simply not going to work in the public sector. So what we need to do is take those theories, modify them to make them better fit the unique characteristics of public organizations that we've already talked about up to this point in time. But even if we are looking only at public organizations, so forget about private organizations for a minute, we're only looking at public organizations. We also have to recognize that public organizations differ from each other. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to a public organization. Public organizations differ in things such as their size. We have some organizations that have tens of thousands of employees. Think the Department of Defense that has over 1 million employees. We include people in the military. You look at Department of Agriculture that has tens of thousands of employees. Compare that to an organization such as the Marine Mammal Conservation Commission. It literally is a commission of 12 marine biologists and a handful of staff members. That's an incredibly small federal commission. So we've got differences in size. size will have a big impact upon the applicability of theory. And we'll see that when you talk about people like Mary Parker Follett and her approach of participative management in democratic organizations. So we need to develop theories based upon the size of the organization. We also develop theories based upon the structure of the organization. We all have worked in very highly regimented, tall, hierarchical types of systems. Like here at Cal State Long Beach, we have a tall hierarchy. There's a president, there's a provost office, there are a series of vice presidents, vice provosts, vice presidents, then down to the college level. And the college level, we have deans and associate deans, department chairs. It's a very hierarchical type of organizational structure. Some theories work well in a tall hierarchical structure. Some don't work all that well in that type of a structure. Some work better in a much flatter organization structure. If any of you work in paramilitary organizations, police departments, fire departments, you're very familiar with this tall hierarchical structure. And some of the theories that work well in paramilitary organizations do not work well in a social service type of organization. Different functions. Some organizations are engaged in direct administration of programs, and that they are interfacing directly with citizens in the production and provision of these benefits and these services. Other organizations are engaged in much more indirect administration, in that they are providing the resources that then make direct administration possible. So they have these different functions. These organizations that are engaged in direct administration, oftentimes at the local level, those are the ones that are populated by what Michael Lipsky calls your street level bureaucrats, those administrators who are interacting with people on a daily basis, as opposed to federal agencies that tend to be engaged more in indirect type of administration. So different functions will mean that different theories are more appropriate in different organizations. As we'd already mentioned, differing environments can also have an impact upon the applicability of theories across organizations. We won't beat that dead horse. We've talked about that already. Different employees. Different organizations have different types of employees. For years in our distance learning MPA program, we took a work site approach to our program, whereby we had different work sites and cohorts at different work sites. One of the work sites that we had Orange County Transit Authority, OCTA. In that same cohort, we then had a different work site at DPSS, Social Services. The employees that work at OCTA tended to be engineers. And so they were pursuing their MPA so that they can move into management level positions because they come from an engineering background. The folks who are working in DPSS came from more of a social worker or more of a human services practitioner type of background. So you have different employees with different backgrounds and different types of training. And our theories will then have an impact, differential impact, depending upon the different types of employees that we have. And then different technologies. Different organizations use different types of technologies. One example of that I'm kind of fond of is this theory known as Thompson's typology of technology. And I like it for a variety of reasons. I really like the alliteration of it all. But Thompson's typology of technologies. Thompson argues that some organizations use what he refers to as a log-linked technology. And according to Thompson, a log-linked technology is something that's very similar to a factory type of setting. So every employee is lined up on this assembly line. And so the work of one employee will then influence the work of the next employee. So this employee puts the headlight on, this employee puts the, a parking lamp on, this employee puts the grill on, but it's all linked together, kind of like a line of logs. And they're all linked together. What this person does affects what this person does, what affects this person does. And that's what he calls a log link type of technology, typically seen in kind of your factory type of assembly line setting. Then he says you have what's called a mediating technology. In a mediating technology, the administrator is connecting the citizen with resources. So you think about something such as an employment bureau. So the primary job of the Employment Bureau is to connect a potential employee with job listings and job openings. That's a meeting technology. Sometimes in the social services, our job will be to find benefits for recipients and then help them apply for those benefits. That's very much of this mediating technology, bringing people together with the resources that they are eligible for. And then the third type of technology, according to Thompson, is what he calls an intensive technology. Intensive technologies, you're dealing with individual citizens differently in that you're dealing with citizens based upon their needs, based upon their characteristics, based upon their lot in life, essentially. And so you look at what they need, you look at what types of consequences you need to provide for them, and how you deal with one person may be different than how you deal with another person. It's a very intensive technology in that what you do with one person may be different than what you do with another person. Those organizations that are staffed with street level bureaucrats that are doing very much direct administration, they're the ones who are engaged in this very intensive type of technology as opposed to a meeting or a log link technology. So different technologies are used in different organizations. The type of technology an organization uses may have an impact upon the applicability of that theory when it's applied to that organization. So essentially, panaceas do not work. A one size fits all approach does not work, even when you are looking at all government organizations, because government organizations can be very different from each other on all those different types of characteristics. So, in this very brief discussion up to this point in time, I think that we have kind of laid a foundation for why we have this course and why we study public organization theory differently than private organization theory. The next question that we have to answer to kind of set the stage for what we're going to do next week is to understand how we are going to talk about these theories and how we are going to compare these public organization theories to each other. And like I told you at the beginning of the class tonight, the reason why I like to use the Tompkins textbook is because of his ability to kind of pull all these theories together on the basis of three different comparisons. The models of organizational effectiveness that they use, the methods for coordination control that they use, and the methods that they use to motivate their employees. So organizational effectiveness in these four different models. This is something he discusses in chapter 3 of the textbook, and it's important because we are going to, every time we talk about a theory, every time we talk about a school of thought, we are going to return to these four different models of organizational effectiveness and ask the question, which of these models does this theory emphasize? And then when we talk about another theory, we can say, which of those models does this theory emphasize? And that then gives us a way to categorize our theories and understand their similarities and their differences. So in the paper copy of the textbook, on page 28 in chapter 3, he lays out to you these four different models of organizational effectiveness. And it's based upon what is called this competing values framework that comes to us from authors named Quinn and Rohrbach. In the Quinn and Rohrbach competing values framework, they established for us four different models of organizational effectiveness based upon the amount of flexibility versus control these models emphasize and the internal versus external focus for these models. So we're going to compare these four different models of effectiveness, how we measure an organizational effectiveness based upon how much flexibility versus control we need and how internally versus externally focused they are. So when you look at this matrix, you've got your x-axis, which on the left side is an internal focus, on the right side is an external focus. Then you have your y-axis. At the top is an emphasis on flexibility. At the bottom is an emphasis upon control. So your first model here, and we'll just go with what we have up on the screen, is the human relations model, which is located in the top left quadrant of the matrix. A human relations model is at the top of the matrix because it emphasizes flexibility. It's on the left side of the matrix because it emphasizes an internal focus. So here with the human relations approach, we are looking at trying to build cohesion, trying to build employee morale for the ultimate purpose, for the ultimate goal of human resource development. So we're looking at our employees. These are theories that pay attention to individual employees. These are theories that try to build the morale of employees, try to motivate employees, try to build cohesion between our employees for the purpose of helping to develop those employees. That's what's known as a human relations type of model. We'll see a lot of our neoclassical theories, such as human relations, such as human resource management, that really do emphasize this model of organizational effectiveness known as human relations. So the human relations model, we are defining an organization's effectiveness as how well it's able to develop its employees as human resources. That is then the indication of the effectiveness of the organization. So some of our theories will fall into the human relations type of a model. Then the second one, which is located below that, is the internal process model of effectiveness. The internal process model of effectiveness is still over on the left side because obviously it's an internal focus, but it's at the bottom of the chart because it is more emphasized, has more of an emphasis on control than it does flexibility. So the internal process model, we are focusing on procedures, communication, the way in which information is managed within the organization, looking at those processes and those procedures. And the purpose is to try and establish stability and control of the processes on a daily basis within the organization. So that's how we define an organization as effective. Does it have those processes that are stable processes, that are controlled processes? Do we have procedures that are well understood by our employees and implemented by our employees on a daily basis? If we have those types of internal processes, that is how we would define an effective organization. So you'll see some of our theories, such as our classic organization theories, will focus on that type of an internal process, looking at the procedures within the organization itself. Then to move over to the top right-hand cell, you have what's called the open systems model. Here we are moving to the top of the chart in that we are emphasizing flexibility, and we're moving to the right of the chart because we are emphasizing a more external focus, looking beyond the walls of the organization. So here in an open systems approach, we are looking at the interaction between the organization and its external environment. We're looking at things such as creating a flexible organization that can then be ready to respond to changes and challenges within the external environment. And the purpose of being able to respond to these changes and challenges in the environment is to acquire resources from the environment to help the organization survive and grow. So the way in which we would measure effectiveness in an open systems type of model is how many resources has the organization been able to acquire from its external environment, and how well has the organization grown in terms of its appropriations, in terms of the amount of grant money that's generated, the size of its employee base, the hiring of employees. So we're looking at growth in the acquisition of resources as the definition of organizational effectiveness with the open systems type of a model. Obviously, this open systems model is seen most prominently in systems theory, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. And then our fourth model of organizational effectiveness is the rational goal model. That is located at the bottom right-hand cell. It's at the bottom because it emphasizes control, and it's to the right because it's more of an external than an internal focus. The focus here with the rational goal model is on goal setting, establishing goals, doing strategic planning, and the eventual goal, if you will, of a rational goal approach is to make the organization productive, make the organization efficient. So to know whether or not we've achieved organizational effectiveness, we're going to look at the productivity and the performance of the organization itself, kind of that macro level focus of the organization goal is organizational productivity. Rational goal model is something we're going to see a lot with our classical theorists that we are going to talk about next week. Again, the importance of this competing values framework is that it shows us how all of our different theories relate to each other in terms of which models of effectiveness they emphasize. How do we know an organization is being effective? And that's the first basis that we are going to use for comparing our different theories and schools of thought as we go through the next 5 weeks. Then the second approach that Tompkins uses that we are also going to use is this thing called the mechanisms for coordination control. This comes to us from a theorist by the name of Mintzberg. Mintzberg identifies to us 6 different mechanisms for how we can coordinate and control work within organizations. The first mechanism for controlling and coordinating work is what he refers to as mutual adjustment. Mutual adjustment is when we communicate with our employees, we involve our employees in decision making, we allow them to participate in the work that's being done in the coordination of that work. So this is working directly with our employees, very much in a neoclassical type of an approach. And that's one way we can control work. A second way is direct supervision, much like what the classical theorists would argue for. Very much top down, where leaders and managers say, this is how a job should be done, and then monitoring employees to make sure the job gets done in that manner. A very top down, controlling, direct supervision. Kind of the antithesis of mutual adjustment. Then the next 4 approaches are standardization approaches. Standardization of processes, standardization of outputs, standardization of worker skills, and standardization of worker values. Standardization of work processes, making sure that the processes we're using to create those goods and services and those products on a daily basis are standardized, that we're using the same processes day in and day out, very similar to a scientific management type of an approach. Standardization of work outputs, looking at what we are creating on a daily basis and making sure that the quality of what we are creating on a daily basis is equivalent across all of our different outputs. So making sure we have these standards and holding our outputs to these quality standards, very much in a quality management type of an approach. Standardization of worker skills, making sure that we are training our employees with the skills that they need in order to do the job in that one best way, or do the job in the way in which they are supposed to be doing the job. And standardization of work values, making sure that the values that workers have are in alignment with the values of the organization implicit within the organization's culture. So through standardization of work processes, outputs, worker skills, and values, what we can do is we can use that standardization to then better control and coordinate all the work that's going on within our organizations. So some of our theories will look at mutual adjustment, like our neoclassical theories. Some of our theories will look more at direct supervision, like our classical theories. Some, like quality management, will look at standardization of work outputs, and so on and so on. But again, this is a very handy way in which we can then compare our different theories and schools of thought to each other. And then the third way in which we are going to compare our different schools of thought is through the methods that they emphasize for motivating our employees. Employees can be motivated in a variety of different ways. They can be motivated through legal compliance. When you motivate an employee through legal compliance, you're basically motivating them through these punitive types of threats, that you have to adhere to these policies and procedures. And if you do not adhere to these policies and these procedures, then there will obviously be some negative impacts, negative consequences for you. So this is kind of what the psychologists refer to as operant conditioning, whereby we will try and shape people's behavior through the use of consequences. So those are legal consequences, legal compliance. A lot, obviously, of our classical theories will use legal compliance as a way in which they motivate their employees. Second way you can motivate your employees is through instrumental rewards, things such as rewards for performance. We are very limited in the public sector in terms of how we can use rewards for performance. Essentially, the rewards that we use in the public sector tend to be much more intrinsic as opposed to extrinsic in nature, because we do have these inherent limitations upon compensating employees. We cannot just give an employee bonus pay based upon their performance level. If we want that employee to get paid more, they'll probably have to get reclassified into a higher position. And to get them reclassified into a higher position, we're probably going to have to do a reclassification study. To warrant a reclassification study, the nature of that job must have changed so that there are additional requirements of that job, there are additional tasks that are being done on a daily basis that would warrant reclassifying that position into a higher pay grade, which would then come with more compensation. So we're kind of limited in terms of the extrinsic rewards that we're able to give in the public sector. Another instrumental reward is what's called considerate leadership. Considerate leadership means taking the wants, needs, and desires of your employees into account, paying attention to your employees, trying to help your employees develop, try to help them meet their goals, trying to help them, as Abraham Maslow will say, help them self-actualize and be all that they can be. So you work with them, you be a considerate leader, that can motivate employees. Group acceptance, recognizing that people have these social needs, that they are social animals, and an organization is a social system. Recognizing that and recognizing the importance of people interacting in groups and accepting those groups within your organization can also then motivate your employees to become more productive. Job identification is another method of motivation. In job identification, we are allowing people to participate in the crafting of their jobs, of what they do on a daily basis. And if they identify more with the jobs that they are doing, they're probably going to be more motivated to do a good job daily. They're going to be more motivated to be productive and have higher performance levels. And goal agreement, goal congruence. If we can find this goal congruence, this goal agreement between the goals of individual employees and the goals of organizations, that will help motivate these employees. If they can see that the goal of the organization is similar and in accordance with their individual goals, then they're going to be more motivated to work toward the goals of the organization. Finding that goal congruence obviously can be difficult, but a lot of our theories talk about using goal congruence, goal agreement as a method for motivating our employees. So to recap, this is the reason why we are using the Tompkins textbook. For each of our theories, each of our schools of thought, when we're done talking about those theories, we will go back and ask the question, what model of organizational effectiveness does this theory emphasize? What mechanisms for coordination and control does this theory emphasize? And what methods for motivating employees are used by this theory? You'll see as you go through the Tompkins textbook at the end of each one, discussion of each one of our theories, he will then present these different charts for you for the models of effectiveness, for the mechanisms for control, and for the methods for motivating employees. And we'll then shade in which of those different aspects of those charts are emphasized by each one of these organization theories. I think it's just a great way in which we can see the similarities and the differences and categorize these different theories together into what we consider to be schools of thought. So we talk about a school of thought, we're talking about a collection of similar theories that we can categorize and group together into what we consider to be a school, and that they share enough similarities that they can be considered together into one school of organization thought. So be mindful of that as you go through the Tompkins textbook, as we go through all of our different theories. We're going to be returning to those three factors to compare our theories on throughout the remainder of our course together. So I just want to present that to you, just so as we start embarking upon our discussion next week of classic organization theory, we kind of understand how we're going to be comparing people like Weber and Taylor and Gulick and Fail and Mooney together in terms of their similarities and their differences. I know it's almost 8 o'clock. We've been going at for a couple of hours. So what I would propose is, instead of doing our breakout groups tonight, we'll just hold off on those breakout groups for this evening. I think this has been probably a pretty comprehensive introduction to the course, what we're doing, how we're doing it, and then some of the ways in which we're going to be comparing the similarities and differences of these theories, just to kind of get you started with what we're going to be doing here in 660. For next week, again, we will delve into classic organization theory. And so we'll do all those classical theorists, comparing them to our three different ways in which we're going to use to compare the theories, do that in the first half of class, take a break. Second half of class, we'll then do our breakout groups on classic organization theorists. Any questions at all on any of this introductory information, on the course itself, course requirements, anything at all before we call an evening for tonight? Okay, Paula, go ahead.
Yeah, I had just to clarify going over the syllabus. So for next week, the reading will be the reading that's listed under tonight, and then also we want to have the reading that's listed under next week done as well.
Yes, correct.
Right, okay.
Kelsey, go ahead.
So when you're saying, okay, for the assignments, I work on campus and I'm looking at doing, like my organization, but would I do my college or would I go even deep, like more narrow and do the department, or could I go even more narrow and pick like a committee?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I would probably recommend the college, because I think if you do it at the college level, you can really see that organizational structure a lot better than if you go down to the specific department. So it's a great question. I would do the college in that type of situation.
Thank you.
Sure. Great question. Well, it's very nice meeting everyone. I'm sure we're going to get to know each other a lot better over the next few weeks. But again, if you have any questions about the course or any material, feel free to send me an email. Otherwise, we will be back at it next Wednesday at 6 o'clock. I look forward to reviewing your first discussion board post. Again, just identify your organization, the primary purpose and functions of the organization, and then respond to 2 of your classmates. And that will be then your first Canvas essay assignment. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Dr.
Sure.
Paul?
Yeah.
Just a question about the MPA program.
Sure.